Hello, everyone. Welcome. Good evening to you here in London in the room, and good day to all of our guests joining live via the live stream. My name is Lesley Hornung, Chief Marketing Officer for HLB, and I'm very pleased to share with you the results of our 2024 HLB Survey of Business Leaders today. I'm going to start with introducing our esteemed panel of speakers for tonight. We have Sanjeevan Bala, Chief Data and AI Officer for ITV with us tonight. Dr. George Cevora, Chief Technology Officer from Cleverchain, and Dr. Stillwell, David Stillwell, Professor of Computational Social Science at the University of Cambridge. And I bet most of you already know our CEO, of course, Marco Donzelli. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for being here. So before we dive into the findings, just some really brief background on this year's survey. We have surveyed nearly 1,000 chief executives for this year's research over the last quarter of 2023 from across 52 countries and about 18 different sectors. And in addition to that, we also have our qualitative research with about 6 in-depth interviews with experts. Now, this year marks our 5th anniversary of our survey program. We started at the start of the 2020 decades in 2020. And now 5 years in, we have done a bit of a retrospect on how the first half of the decade has been in terms of the business landscapes, the trends, the challenges, how they've been evolving. And we're also deep diving in the biggest trend at the moment, which is AI. So with that, I think I'm just going to dive straight into our panel. We've got a lot to cover. What we find is that business leaders are embracing technology to support both resilience and competitiveness, considering all of the poly-crisis that has been going on in recent years and how the speed of change and the need for adaptation and agility has been continuing rising. So with that, at the start of the decade, we found that business leaders were expecting business models to become more flexible, more mobile, and more tech-enabled. And actually, when we asked about their plans for adopting new technologies in the new year, we find that 60% is planning to do so in 2024, which is actually double the amount that we found 5 years ago when we first started off. And 68% agrees that emerging technologies, including AI, are key to driving creativity and competitiveness. Excuse me. So my first question, Marco, I would like to start with you. How do you see the role of technology has played in accelerating change and business adoption in recent years?
I think it's pretty clear to everybody that we have seen just a transformation that is really unprecedented. Of course, Gen AI, over the last year and a half or so, has tremendously boosted this situation. But we have had like a number of situations, including COVID, that of course was a factor. There were like various trigger factors. Some of the technologies have been around for a long time. They just had a tremendous acceleration in the end. And talking about AI specifically, the various scope that the immense scope that we have with AI and the possibility of somewhat easy usage, especially with the coming of course, ChatGPT and so on, has given a tremendous help. But I would say that it's all driven for companies by the possibility of efficiencies and revenue generation, in my view.
Mm-hmm. David, being the academic on the panel, what's your view on how technology has played such a major role in the last few years?
Sure. I mean, I don't know. Ever since I've been an academic on these kinds of panels, it's been a truism that things are changing faster than they've ever changed before, and it will continue to do so. One thing we underestimate is just the simple stuff like having a Zoom call or a Teams call. I set up an online course in about 2018, and we started using Zoom, and no one knew how to do breakout rooms, and it was all very exciting. Pandemic came along, and it just sped everything along. And AI is going to be the same. The AI people I talk to, they say AI is going to be like electricity, right? So, there won't be any electricity-enabled companies right now. There are just companies that use electricity, of course, and AI will be the same. So it will just become part of the fabric of life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When it comes to trends and hypes, maybe even in technology, we've seen quite a few in recent years. Think about the metaverse, cryptocurrencies, blockchain was a really hot topic as well. There is a lot of these technology trends around, if you will. George, if I may direct this question to you, how should leaders kind of cut through the noise, and what makes AI different?
I think it's really important to look beyond the hype. It's like when other people say that they are getting lots of value from a particular technology, it does not mean that you as a business will be able to achieve the same thing. And quite to the contrary, the definition of innovation is that you do something new, something that hasn't been tried before. So the fact that some other businesses are not benefiting in the same way does not necessarily mean that you won't. I think what is really important is to have a fairly concrete plan how things will work. It doesn't need to be deeply technical. It can be just, say, I work in anti-money laundering, so I have an idea that I have very rich data about companies, and I can use AI to interpret the data and make some inference about financial risk associated with a particular business. That's a concrete plan. I can't just go, I will adopt AI.
Mm-hmm. When it comes to AI particularly, business leaders are trying to make the most out of this technology at the moment to increase efficiencies and boost innovation for their companies, of course. At the start of the decade, when we started this research, AI was stated as the most important as well as the most disruptive technology for the 2020s decade, if you will. This year, we found that 65% of business leaders, quite a big majority compared to other technologies, listed AI as the most important for the coming 5 years. And even more interesting, 52% agreed that when it came to adopting AI technologies, the business was actually more willing to take on risk than they are in other areas, compared to only 16% who said that they disagreed with that statement. So with that in mind, do you think that AI will still be the top technology in another 5 years' time when we're reflecting back on the 2020 decade? I know it's difficult to look ahead in the future, of course, but considering David's statement about AI being like electricity, I'm guessing you would agree with that.
Would I agree? Yeah, I mean, one can easily be a hostage to fortune. I talk to computer scientists who are developing AI. They don't really know what's going to happen in 2 years' time, never mind 5, 6 years' time. But I would be surprised if it's not coming from the AI direction. There'll be other technologies, of course, but I guess the other thing is AI will be integrated into other things. So we won't necessarily think, oh, the new technology is an AI thing. There will be just new biological things that we're doing in research for new drugs, which are fed by AI, but we'll see them as biology, technology, where we'll be living longer or whatever. But yeah, I think AI will be a platform that underlies a lot.
Sanjeevan, being the Chief Data and AI Officer of a large organization, what's your view on this?
Yeah, I think for us, we see it as quite a transformative opportunity. Think about what ITV does. We produce content, promote it, distribute it, and then monetize it through advertising or a subscription sort of mechanism. And that's kind of our end-to-end value chain. So for us, I can give you 3 examples of where we're really kind of getting a lot of value from it. So the first is, how do we, given all the content we create, how do we make viewers aware of that content and effectively acquire viewers at a lower cost per acquisition? So we're using AI to kind of build segments, So, for example, if you're a fan of Love Island, what else might you watch, and how do we identify these segments? We build a lot of these segments. It does a lot of lookalike, so it kind of finds groups of users that are watching a certain show, finds lookalikes, and then we're able to kind of promote that content off platform on Instagram and other social media platforms, which means we can then acquire those users at a lower cost per acquisition. So marketing return on investment comes down effectively, or it becomes more efficient. So that's the first bit. So we're acquiring viewers more efficiently. The second then is once they're on the platform in ITVX, for example, how do we use AI to then get them to watch more content? So if you've just watched Corrie or news or a documentary, what's the next show we should recommend that's going to be highly relevant for you? And the challenge there is, do we get you to watch across multiple genres to widen your relationship with us? Or do we super serve you within the genre you're watching? And that balance is really sort of delicate, and AI helps with a lot of those things. So once you're getting you to watch more content, the last part of our channel, is how do we monetize this more effectively? So I'll give you a really good example that we're using AI for here is historically advertising has been sold around demographics. So if you're an ABC One or a 1634, very traditional kind of mechanisms of how advertising has been sold. We built an AI solution that effectively watches the content, listens to the subtitles, and then listens to the audio file. What it then does is it identifies moments in the content where particular ad products are spoken about very positively. So an example would be if you're watching Love Island and coffee is spoken about very positively, it understands that, and we put a coffee ad in the ad break. What then happens in terms of all your traditional brand recall metrics that advertisers spend on is it absolutely outperforms because it's contextually relevant and it's not seen as a form of very invasive advertising. So that then allows us to effectively create a greater premium or yield on our advertising. Those are three examples around how we've been sort of creating and exploiting value from AI at ITV.
Yeah. So AI is basically the reason why my screen time is too high. Yeah. You just keep me watching more.
It falls very to the table.
Good. So, Marco, if I may direct the next question to you then. Last week, all eyes were on Davos as the World Economic Forum had their annual summit there. And AI was a big topic of conversation as well. But they also spoke about the potential risks of AI. So think about the fact that, a lot of these largely used AIs are controlled by a small number of very powerful companies, for example. The ways in which AI can actually be used to do harm, with misinformation, with more sophisticated cybersecurity attacks, things like that. Do you think that these concerns are, legitimate, and how should businesses evaluate the risks that come with AI as well?
Yeah, of course, they're absolutely legitimate. So with all great things also come a lot of risks. That doesn't have to stop us, but I think we are getting into a completely new era, and I think, yes, of course, companies should develop AI ethical guidelines, and then continuous monitoring, audit, for bias, and but first and foremost, that should come from governments, should come from society at large. It's a much bigger problem, and I just want to remember with you the Twitter account of the bot from Microsoft, right? It's a clear example. So I don't know if you're familiar with that, but Tide, that Twitter bot, became very quickly, extremely racist, and they had to take it down. So and that is a pretty good example, but there could be cyber attacks. There have been actually cyber attacks, but apart from these, like financial misinformation, influencing in a certain way market behavior. You name it. There are so many risks that should be addressed, but I think it's just like a collective effort that should be done. Academia, David, and of course government and companies as well.
Yeah. Speaking of academia, the way in which we learn and the impact that the way that we learn has on the talent pipeline and the educational system when it comes to AI is also a topic that's been widely discussed. How do you think AI is changing the educational system, David?
Yeah, so I mean, it's absolutely huge. I could give a couple of hour lecture on it at least.
What does it mean for business leaders and their talent pipeline?
Yeah, so I think so for me, generative AI, it's a kind of a co-worker that allows experts to do what they do better, faster, higher quality, right? So it's not something that replaces experts, but it is something that augments the work of experts. What does that mean for training, for education, right? So my example here is the law. So my understanding is you do your law degree, you join a firm, and then you spend kind of 6 years doing almost donkey work, right? Of just sort of looking stuff up and reading through NDAs and really kind of relatively low-level stuff. And then the idea is, after long enough, you've got enough experience and expertise that you can do some of the really hard legal questions that involve deep thought, right? And the challenge is AI comes along and it goes, well, I can do all the donkey work, right? So we still need those experts at the top, and they're going to be helped with AI. But how do you get from your law degree to becoming an expert when there isn't that staircase in between? So that's what I tell all the business people that I speak to. I say the importance of experts is going to become even more, because now as an expert, the AI helps you. You can do far more stuff. So it's really important that you are an expert in something, because if you're the 50th percentile, then the AI is also the 50th percentile. So what are you going to be an expert in is the challenge.
I actually take a slightly broader view on that. So I think there's sort of what we're certainly seeing is there's sort of three buckets, I think, where in one bucket, I think it'll be remiss to say that there will absolutely be some form of job displacement, right, for certain types of roles. That is absolutely going to happen. So the question then becomes, as a business leader, what's your responsibility around upskilling that kind of group of cohort of colleagues and employees? Then be the second tier, which I think is the augmentation approach, which is sort of saying you've got your current experts, you're going to increase productivity because they're going to be co-piloting with an AI and therefore become far more productive and hyper-productivity occurs. Then I think the third category will be a whole tranche of completely new roles. So there's been the talk of prompt engineers. These are experts that can kind of query a ChatGPT in a more sophisticated way to get really good outputs. Is that going to be a long-term role or not? It's to be seen. But I think there'll be new roles emerging that you'll need experts that currently don't exist today, which will create another category of roles. I think it's a really different landscape depending on the sort of role and organisation you're in.
I would say that I think it's more about bringing up different aspects of the same role. So if you are very simplified, if you are a consultant, your job will be less about making sure that your slides are good, but that the content is really good. So I don't share your view on the donkey work. I think it can, quite to the contrary, unlock the kind of boring part of that, and you can actually do some thinking about these NDAs and that content.
I'll challenge that slightly. So if you're in a business where your revenue is hourly based, so your fee-based revenue is based on time, I think there's going to be a real challenge around how that value is then attributed, right? Because effectively, there'll be an expectation that you're going to be able to do things more efficiently, so your effective hourly rate becomes marginalized and commoditized. So I think it then moves up the value chain around, if you're not selling knowledge and expertise, how do you repackage that around an outcome you're generating for your clients? And I think that's where this whole knowledge economy is going to start to shift.
Yeah, I think you're totally right, especially for people, businesses, professional services.
Professional services, consultants, absolutely. Anything by the hour.
So that's a big question. I think there are two elements to it. One is, of course, more in general, what is going to happen to the chunk of people in general in various roles who maybe are not able to make the transition, and maybe for various reasons, including age gaps or for other limitations, they cannot really transform that quickly. So what are they going to do in society? So and the other thing is that you mentioned, David, about the staircase and so on, and it's not just about building the expert, but also it's about building the culture of a company. So if you basically are hired and then already you are at a high level because you are a top expert, but you don't know anything about that company. You haven't worked a single day and you don't know the dynamics and so on, then how would the culture of that company be formed? While now, of course, these people have been working together for a long time and have shared experiences and stories, and that's how you create a company culture.
I think the different views just within this panel are actually a really great bridge into our next finding. So this year in our survey, we asked our respondents multiple questions about their attitude towards AI, the type of use cases that they're deploying it on, and what concerns them around AI, around barriers of adoption, things like that. And through the nearly 1,000 responses, we were able to actually segment based on these attitudinal questions. And what we found, how we segmented these respondents was in three groups. The first one being the innovators. So this is the group of people who are, keep in mind, this is self-assessment, right? Who are already integrating and leading when it comes to deploying AI in their business. That group is 44% of our respondents. Then the next group, 38%, is the group of explorers. So this is the group that says that they are interested in AI and willing to try it, but it's not a top priority for them. And then there's the group that we call the conservatives, the remaining 18%, who are a bit more adverse and cautious when it comes to AI. Now, some interesting findings, like along these three segments, if you will. I guess my first question, actually, that I would like to ask, considering that the innovators is the largest group, 44% of our respondents, does that surprise you that so many business leaders are ranking themselves as already ahead of the curve when it comes to their AI maturity? Would you have expected that?
Maybe some of them might feel like.
That's why I was saying self-assessment.
I think if 44% thinks that they are innovative, then probably they are not clear on what's going on elsewhere.
It's quite optimistic, right? Yeah. Good. So just looking at these groups in a bit more detail, operational efficiency was the top priority for the conservative group. So the group that is not actually playing with AI so much just yet. Considering how AI is being used in most cases, actually to increase efficiencies, does that surprise you? It's quite conflicting, isn't it? That they say that operational efficiency is their top priority in the next 12 months, yet they're not really willing to test drive AI. What are your views on that? How would they otherwise be tackling efficiency?
In my view, there is still a little bit of confusion, businesses have to set their priorities straight. And the thing is that there are so many ways that AI can be applied for that it can create confusion, and then you need to understand where to start from. What is going to be your journey, and it can be overwhelming. And yes, you tell me, are you going to use AI for this? And I say, oh yes, of course I'm going to do it. Then maybe just gonna take a look. Okay, no, you know what? Then I have to fix some other problems first, and so on. So, I think it's very important to set some objectives, to understand like very clear use cases, do some testing, and then really be practical, and then really maneuver a little bit of that, but rather than being too theoretical, just practice on that.
I think a lot of organisations, certainly I speak to, are still experimenting in this space. So I think one of the things we've certainly observed is how do companies want to take the productivity benefit, right? So is the case with generative, you're getting the same number of employees generating a 5x, 10x volume of output, or are you sort of saying we're going to take a fewer employee base to generate the same output? And actually it's not the volume of the output that people are looking at sometimes, it's the quality of the output, and that's quite subjective. So I think they're trying to figure out some of those things. And then I think the other aspect of it is because of the rate of sort of the way these tools are emerging, a lot of companies are seeing individual productivity go up, but collective productivity go down. And that's because a lot of these tools are solving vertical problems, not horizontal problems. And most businesses have horizontal workflows. So an example is we can all use ChatGPT to write a better email, do a better first draft, interpret a legal document and summarize it. Brilliant. But when you string that along a creative process, you have to keep pulling things in and out of your workflow, and then you lose collective productivity. So I think there's a lot of those challenges I think we're still facing, and it feels like we're very much at that sort of teenage consumer phase of this hype. We haven't yet got the enterprise sort of consolidation phase yet, which I think is coming next.
Mm-hmm.
And this technology is still risky to deploy. I mean, it's not obvious what the benefits were going to be of AI 6 months ago, or at least how to put them into practice. So if you're in a firm that's worried about the bottom line and trying to cut costs and be efficient, then taking a risk on AI, it makes sense. Maybe that's not their first priority.
Well, I think that a large part of the problem is that companies are not ready, actually, to apply AI in a meaningful way, or most of them at least are not. The issue, I feel, is double. Actually, there's one fundamental issue, which is that most of the senior leadership in companies, I don't think, are sufficiently comfortable and knowledgeable about AI to make it a meaningful part of their strategy. And I think this is one of the things that really needs to be changed to drive the adoption of AI.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I was just nudging the guys to go to the next finding, because actually this is exactly what we found, right? We asked business leaders where they are deploying AI, and basically the percentages here are all fairly in the same direction. So our conclusion of that is that they're taking a bit of a scattergun approach and just trying to throw AI at a bunch of different problems and seeing what sticks. So when we spoke previously, Sanjeevan, you told us about how ITV has taken more of a value-based approach to identifying the best use cases for AI. Can you maybe tell us a bit more about that?
Yes, I think what you've seen, I think in previous iterations of digital transformation is lots of companies would kick off lots of proof of concepts, right? And what they effectively do is you have hundreds of these things running, generating cost, and everyone kind of gets really puzzled around what value is it really generating, right? And the proof of concept, all it really does is a bit of technology can do what it says it does, right? There's no consideration around, well, what value is that going to generate for your organization? So we took a completely different approach to all of this. We took a value-based approach, which effectively says, if we were to use data in marketing and build a segment, for example, how much more could we generate in terms of marketing value? And we went around developing actual value cases. And the reason that's really important is it does a couple of things in the organization. It makes sure that you align with what I call the last mile in the organization. So often digital leaders don't own any of the capabilities, but marketing, commercial, product own the levers of where the value gets realized, right? So it's really important you mesh with those leaders. You get the sales leaders to kind of sign up to an incremental sales target, marketing to sign up to kind of a more efficient marketing. And that puts them collectively on hook to then realize and execute in the last mile. And the reason when you take a value-based approach, what often happens is organizations focus a lot around the data, the technology, the AI model, foundation model, all the rest of it. That's the easy bit. When you go into the last mile, what happens is you have to solve all the bits of the execution for value to be realized. So I'll give you an example, right? You can build the best churn model for a marketeer, right? The most complex, sophisticated neural network churn model, the most predictive model you can ever use. But if marketing can't use that in a campaign that can deploy into that, let's say Snapchat or Instagram to promote some show, it's utterly useless. So you've got to think about everything in the last mile to fully unlock value. And that's why a value-based approach solves all of those problems. So you don't end up with thousands of POCs, cost generative and no value. You do fewer, but you're more likely to get 10x gains rather than loads of 1x gains.
Mm-hmm. David, as someone who has quite a bit of experience, George, someone who's got quite a bit of experience consulting in AI space, would you agree? Like, how do you identify the best areas to focus on when it comes to AI deployment?
Yeah, I think, Sanjeevan, specifically about your example, I think it's not just about identifying the right things, but for the last mile, it is also that ITV is lucky that they have someone who understands this topic in the leadership, and you have the leverage, and you can help push that through. What happens in very many companies is that there will be no one who can do that. And then there will be very many fairly junior technologists who will be tasked with do this, do that. And not only that they will not have the cut through to actually deliver on what actually matters on the value, but furthermore, they will not even understand necessarily the value. It's way too common that the technologists will not think about what is the value chain of the business. They will think about it as I'm predicting the churn in the best possible way, and that's not necessarily what you want to use, even if you can plug it into Instagram.
I work with an insurance company, and they were trying to improve what happens after you have a car crash, and they're doing the repairs, or they're deciding to write off the car, whatever it was. And their data scientists spent 3 months on the front line just seeing that experience of what actually happens when there's a crash, who gets the call, what do they do with it, really trying to understand the last mile, as it were, before building some very, very clever technical solution. But you have to have that bridge between the business and the data science. And as you say, data science doesn't understand business. Business doesn't know what data can do for them. And that's most of my MBA teaching and executive teaching is about teaching executives, here's what the intuition of generative AI is, here's what it can do, here's why, this lawyer ended up using it and everything went wrong, and he got fined by the court because it just made up some stuff. So, trying to build that bridge between the two.
Mm-hmm. Actually, speaking of barriers to AI, if you will, this is another question. We asked our respondents what the greatest barriers to AI adoption were. And what we found in the top 5 are top 1, data security and privacy concerns. Secondly, lack of digital transformation skills, data quality and quantity. Then in 4th place, lack of use cases or unclear ROI. And then finally, old IT systems. So I feel like these topics are kind of the same that have been emerging here. So maybe, Sanjeevan, if I can direct that question to you again, when it comes to concerns around data and privacy, how should business leaders start overcoming that challenge or that concern about privacy and data issues?
Yes, I think a lot of it comes down to it's probably easier, I guess, if you're a consumer-facing organization, right? Because there's a whole set of regulation like GDPR and all that I think the industry generally has sort of had to kind of get across. But effectively, I think it's that culture of, how do you, as an organization, start to think about data as an asset? And how do you move it, I think, out of kind of the world of technology and IT and into the business, right? So a lot of work, again, we've done at ITV, is around the business owns its data, right? And I think if you go down the value-based approach, there's a real clear link between the value that you can sort of capture and the potential value that's at stake, right? And I think once you link value and quality of data, it starts to create that sort of momentum where the business starts to care about it. They worry about the number of completed name and address fields in their customer database, for example. And that then creates the foundation for some of these other things. The other bit that I think gets really important, and you touched on tech debt before, is if you get into this sort of privacy by design, value by design at the outset, it makes it a lot easier. Because all too often you'll hear in organizations where marketing will be racing up to do something, they're about to press go, the legal team are pulled in, and legal is saying no, right? And it just causes all sorts of problems. Whereas if you get everyone across the table in cross-functional teams at the outset, I think it just streamlines that entire process, and your path to value gets a lot quicker.
Mm-hmm. George, I see you nodding.
Yeah, I do really agree. I think that there is one more step that I often don't see in companies, and that is that the value of data is understood, okay, but it remains somewhat abstract. I think that there is and this needs to be super concrete, clear, and kind of hard limits set on that. There needs to be someone who's accountable for the quality of data, just like in any kind of asset-heavy business, there's someone who's accountable for maintenance of assets. So it needs to be someone, again, in senior leadership of the business who actually is accountable for that and leads the whole organization on that, because for many employees, when they collect data, it feels like something kind of secondary part of the job, like something that's nice to have. But with good leadership, I think it's possible to establish that this is core, and it's just like, say, if you are a business that runs a fleet of vans, it's just like maintaining your vans and making sure that they don't break down.
The second greatest barrier identified is the lack of digital transformation skills. So kind of coming back to the discussion point earlier around upskilling the workforce. David, what would be what are your thoughts on that, on how business leaders should actually tackle this upskilling challenge to overcome barrier number 2?
So I disagree. I don't think there is a lack of digital transformation skills. I mean, since 2016 or whenever data science became a thing, machine learning, universities have been pumping out master's students to do this kind of stuff. The trouble is not there aren't data people, I don't think, nowadays. It's there aren't data people who know enough about the business. So I mean, maybe that's the transformation bit that I'm talking about. The people who've just come out of university, they can do some amazing machine learning models, but they haven't absorbed the culture and really understood the organization that they're working in. So I think that's what's missing with the transformation.
I think I'd build on that. I think you're absolutely right, because I think all too often what you see is the focus and the ROI case is predicated on a load of tech investment, because it's very tangible and it's easy to say, look at the progress we've made, we've put something in the cloud or we've done something. Whereas where it all falls over is in the change piece, right? Because nearly all transformation are people and cultural change, right? The tech, the data, all that stuff's actually quite easy to do. It's the cultural change that most companies underinvest in their transformation programs. There's change leaders, change experts, and it's all around the psychology of change in an organization. That's the bit where a lot of this falls over.
Yeah. Marco, you're nodding. I know change management is a topic that
Yes,
we've been
I mean,
talking
of course,
about a lot.
Of course, we just launched our strategy as an organization. So, I mean, some of the changes globally we already implemented in the last strategy, and the two strategies are not that far away. There are many connection points, but now we are entering in a really new era, and so we do know what the challenges of change management are, and especially for a people business like ours. So we are really invested in this globally, and we have a very thorough program. Hopefully, I mean, we are confident that we are going to achieve our objectives. But yes, I do agree totally. I mean, it's all about people and culture. The other things are there. They will be done. But I know many examples. Even in my previous careers of like great tools that we built and it cost millions and then just remain there. Nobody used them. So you don't want that.
Yeah. Good. So for the final part of the panel discussion, the third part of it, I would like to move the conversation slightly beyond the AI trend and talking about some of the findings from our report, looking at the bigger challenges in the business landscape. So actually, when we every year that we do this survey, we ask about top concerns and risks to business, right? To kind of measure what the risk landscape is like. And actually, what we find is that today business leaders are facing what we've titled a conveyor belt of crises, because there are so many different things that are of high concern. And we actually found that from 2020, when we started this study, versus today, let me just have a quick peek. I believe the number of risks that are a concern to more than half of business leaders went from 5 to 12, something like that. And the scope of them is increasing as well. So in terms of like top risks, the top ones are still economy related, so things like inflation, economic uncertainty, geopolitical risk as well in the top 3, but then a very close runner-up in 4th place, for example, cybersecurity. And some of the risks that were notable to us is something like misinformation, which actually from when we first started measuring risks 5 years ago has doubled as a concern. And same thing goes for climate change, which I think has tripled even in terms of a concern 5 years back versus now. So maybe just going to the point of misinformation, and we spoke about this a bit earlier on the sofas when we were prepping. the risk of misinformation and how it affects business process. And then again, I guess the link to AI, the role that that plays in misinformation. Sanjeevan, how do you think that misinformation can affect business prospects in the near future?
There's probably a macro and a micro perspective to this. So if you look at the next 12 to 18 months or so, pretty much most of the world is going to have an election. And I think with generative and AI, the ability to kind of create very believable deep fakes and the rest of it, the whole fabric of democracy and the sort of geopolitical landscape is fundamentally set to kind of have quite a kind of awakening. And then that has a knock-on effect, right? Because that has effects and impacts on trust, and how do we sort of value trust in this kind of new sort of era? So that's probably a macro kind of consideration, right? Because that puts the whole consideration in terms of the ecosystem we operate within. If you're a global business, what does that mean, and how does that then operate? Within organisations, you touched a little bit on cyber and some of those things. There's a similar playthrough, right? So it's very easy now through investor calls to kind of get enough of a voice recording so you can mimic a CFO, for example. What does that then mean in terms of your internal controls? What does that then mean in terms of how you govern within, the organisation? Yeah. And effectively, what's happening now is boards of listed businesses are having to take on increasing responsibility around their governance responsibility, around how do you effectively manage some of these risks. And I think that becomes an increased challenge. And to your point earlier around the skill set, if you're not seeing the skill set in executives, how are you going to see that at this sort of board level? Because ultimately that's where governance of these organisations need to sit. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Marco, without getting too political, but to Sanjeevan's point, there is a lot of elections coming up in the foreseeable future. As a CEO of a global organization, what's your view on the risk or the impact that misinformation AI might have on these elections?
I mean, it's pretty clear. We lived that in the past, a few years ago, with a few elections, and there is a big risk that we're going to leave it at least in maybe one. So, without mentioning the countries, but yes, there is a risk of polarization in environments that are already highly polarized. There is a risk of soldiers of armies of bots around spreading all sorts of fake information. I mean, I don't know what is the solution to that, to be honest. Mm-hmm. That's also the, let's say, the dark side of our democracies, and so that's to see. But this is going to be a very interesting year. I mean, think about what the impact will be on some of the major challenges that we are living now. I mean, just think about the conflict in Ukraine or the situation in the Middle East, and how is this going to affect really a terrible situation?
I think that is kind of fundamental topic for how we as society understand media, for instance, image media. So paintings at one point were used to depict realistically people, and we don't understand them like that anymore. Photography was then the record of truth, and with Photoshop we stopped understanding that as such, and now with Gen AI it's completely moved. And I think we just have to move that forward, how we appreciate that medium. And in terms of the risk for elections, it's not risk, it's happening. There was an election in Slovakia in October. They have this kind of special system where during the last week before election, media is barred from publishing political content, just to kind of cool it off. And what happened during the last week was that through online forums and WhatsApp, there was an audio recording discrediting the liberal candidate that has gone through. It has been shown that it's deep fake. It's nothing true on it. But the liberal candidate just very closely lost the election. And of course, I'm not saying the result would be different, but there's a good chance that it's had some effect. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we will see that happening many times over. It's not risk, it's certainty.
Yes. I mean, my positive view was linked to Photoshop, right? So we used to believe photographs. Now we know they can be photoshopped. But life kind of went on, and there were still other things that we could believe. I think I think the challenge, well, there's a short-term challenge, which is that, if I was a bad actor, I would create a fake video or something like that, exactly what sounds like happened in Slovakia, the day before, a couple of days before, right? That's the short term, because then it's too late for the media to debunk it. People will have made their votes, and 3 days later they'll regret it, but just too short. So I think that's the short-term risk, that hopefully that kind of thing would only happen once, right? Because, hopefully society sees, videos can be faked. And we had that one time where, an election went a different way than it might have done otherwise because of it. And then in the future, any more videos, same with Photoshop, you just don't, you question them to start with. But it could happen, at least once. But I think the long-term challenge is more just who do you trust? Who do you believe? These kinds of questions. I find it mad that Elon Musk took over Twitter, and Twitter had a pretty good system for identifying trusted people, and then he got rid of that and replaced it with something which is a mess, as far as I understand, as a Twitter user. Like, I don't know who to trust and who not to trust. So I think systems like that says, this is a person that has been checked to be real, I think could be key. I think the other side is like personally ourselves. So I'm hearing of if someone's got video online, then criminals can pretend to be me. They can call up my grandparents and say, I'm your grandson, and I'm stuck in some foreign country, and the police have put me in jail, and I need some money in order to pay a bribe to get out. Right, that's a real case I heard about, and from my grandparents' perspective, it will sound like me. It will be, they have all the information about me because that's all sort of available on social media. So how can my grandparents possibly know that it's not me? So, I'm thinking in my family of, setting up some kind of password between us so that, my grandparents can say, is that really you, David? Tell me the password, because that's the only way I can think of to actually build trust.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Maybe we should start teaching AI ethics and principles in schools as well. Just, at least for the future generations.
Yeah. I hear that one, especially a few years ago from social media. That was always the response from the social media companies. It was, education needs to teach some of this stuff so that people recognize fake things. And I always felt it was a bit of a cop-out because it's such a long time system to educate everyone to really understand it, and it's not clear if you can actually do it that well. It's incredibly hard actually to spot good misinformation. I fall for things on Twitter that I retweet, and then later on Twitter tells me, oh, by the way, this thing you retweeted was totally not true. So I fall for it, and I'm meant to be researching it. So the idea that the general public can understand this stuff, I just don't think education's the answer. For me, a large proportion has to come from the top, the companies that are running the systems, media companies or governments or whatever it is, that says we need a system that is trustable without having to make the whole population into misinformation experts.
Yeah. What I totally agree. What I meant was educating on how to behave in the future, because so that the impact of possible bad actions that you do with AI on society. So it's more like preventing that someone in the future. I know that's always going to happen, but at least educating, like, don't steal, don't do this, and then don't do bad usage of AI. But of course, it's very long term. It's probably 30 years. And
the technology changes so much faster than that, because we applied it to mobile phones. When I was in elementary school, there were no mobile phones. So I had to learn it somewhere else. We cannot rely on schools, really.
So maybe to, as we're nearing the end of the panel discussion, move on to something slightly more positive rather than the scares around misinformation and AI. I guess a more optimistic finding from this year's report is levels of confidence. So what we found this year is that 85% of respondents were actually confident about their ability to grow revenue in the next 12 months. This is a record high that we've recorded since the start of our survey program. And also economic optimism was up too by 14 percentage points compared to last year. So those that expect global economic growth to increase, that number was up by 14 percentage points compared to last year. Now, going back to our segmentation based on attitudes towards AI for a moment, what we found is that actually the innovators, remember that group that was most willing and eager to use AI, they are also the most optimistic. Maybe not entirely surprising, but we saw that with a more positive attitude towards AI, actually levels of confidence and ability to grow revenue also went up. So I guess my first question, maybe for you, Marco, does that correlation surprise you?
I mean, of course, it's to me it's clear. You know, the innovator sees more opportunities for growth through innovation. So it's self-defining a little bit, and sometimes, you know, the innovator can be overly optimistic by definition. But of course, not necessarily. This is the case of our respondents. So.
Yeah.
I think there's also a flip side to that, which is the companies that don't have particularly good financial performance now will just have less money to spend on innovation, which I think is part of the explanation as well. And I think it's the really interesting part of that problem, actually, because if they are not investing, are they going to fall behind? I think that really requires quite lots of consideration when you find yourself in that situation, whether, okay, we can't invest in AI, in whatever new technology, where our competition is that actually a wise decision?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, just to say, I personally am quite an optimist when it comes to AI. We talked about, you know, metaverse and Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. I wasn't an optimist about that stuff. Metaverse is still a bit out there, but I could never see personally like a particular use case for stuff like cryptocurrency. But I can see it with AI. I think it, you know, it's a technology that not only that does some incredible things now, but there's no reason that it can't keep doing incredible things into the future. Some of the things, as I say, that the computer scientists have talked to me about, you know, things like, so you know, we're all used to machines can translate, right, English to French, but now machines can translate, you know, English to Python programming language. That's all fine, but soon it will be translating, you know, genes to English and English to genes, right? So you'll be able to kind of talk to your DNA, right, or talk to data that comes from telescopes and the physical universe. Because as far as the machine's concerned, it's just kind of more data that can be translated between. So I just think the opportunities are absolutely huge with this technology. That, you know, I think you have to be clear what value you are seeing in a particular use case in an organization. But I think the sort of the researchers are going to go a long way with this, and there's going to be a constant stream of stuff coming to business.
Sanjeevan, do you share the optimistic views?
Yeah, I do. I think what's different this time round is the rate at which it's all becoming affordable and commoditized. So it's now far more accessible, right? There's a lot of software as a service applications now. For, you know, a few pounds a month on a credit card, you have access to really advanced compute, which wasn't possible before. I think the other part is, I think a lot of organizations will just have AI by stealth, where it'll be packaged into products like your ERP system and all the other things you typically put into organizations. I think it'll just get introduced as part of the fabric. And so it just creates an opportunity to sort of, run your organization more efficiently, drive more top line growth, because there's this just commoditization. And the last strand, I think, is the onboarding. Right, so going back to cryptocurrency and Web3, and we did some work in that space, it was really hard to get a wallet, right? And there's this hard wallet, cold wallet, hot wallet. It was really complex to kind of just actually try and buy some cryptocurrency. With AI at the moment, you put your credit card in, ChatGPT, you're up and running, right? It's so easy. So that onboarding, they've really solved that problem. And I think that's why there's a lot of optimism now in terms of how it's all becoming commoditized, very accessible and very usable.
Yeah, amazing. Excellent. So we've got 2 minutes left on our live stream. So I think we're at the end of our session. Thank you so much. Great discussion. I think we will continue the discussion offline. That just leaves me to say you can now download our full report on our website, HLB.global/survey of business leaders. This year, with the whole AI angle, we've created a bit of an AI self-assessment quiz. So go to our website. You can do a bit of a self-assessment to see how you compare to the respondents from our research. And lastly, I would like to thank all of the business leaders that participated in our research and completed our survey, and of course our HLB colleagues across the globe that supported our initiative and our research. We hope you enjoy it, and we welcome the opportunity to discuss any of the findings or the topics that have been raised. Good day for those of you joining online, and those of you in the room. I hope you enjoyed, and we can have a little chat with our panelists afterwards. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.